Hi everyone and welcome, this is the Apostate Prophet. I hope you're having a great week. One of the main things when thinking about Islam is the... No, not this time. I'm talking about the No. Come on. I'm talking about the Kaaba, one of the main images that you get when you Google Islam. It is one of the main images because it is the most important location in Islam, the most important building. It's the center of Islam. It's the most venerated place and building in the world. Every Muslim has to turn towards the Kaaba when they pray. And Muslim pilgrims visit the Kaaba and have to circle it multiple times in a practice called tawaf. It is so important because it is believed to be the first building established for Allah, the one God. Although Allah doesn't need that building. Weird. Today the cube is surrounded by the greatest mosque, the Great Mosque of Mecca, or the Sacred Mosque. The Islamic belief on the origins of the Kaaba are very different from what an objective, non-Islamic research finds. According to Islamic belief, the Kaaba was built by Abraham, the forefather of Abrahamic religion, and he was told to build it by Allah. That is made very clear in Quran chapter 22, verse 26. Muslims believe that Ishmael, Abraham's first son, was given the blessing of the Kaaba so that his descendants would make an annual pilgrimage and a sacrifice feast at the Kaaba. Muslims believe that Ishmael was Abraham's religiously important and chosen son, although the Bible, where Abraham's story originated, says that God chose Isaac, not Ishmael. Ishmael is described as a warrior, and not the one who inherits his father's legacy. He is seen among many Jews as wicked but repentant, while Christians simply see him as Abraham's other wicked son. It is quite weird that Arab Muslims would make such a change in the biblical narrative and belief, and afterwards claim that Jews and Christians falsified the Bible. There are more differences than that, such as that Ishmael's mother Hagar, who is Abraham's handmaiden in the Bible, is suddenly directly Abraham's second wife in Islam. These changes appear probably because Arabs assume that they are descendants of Ishmael, while Jews are descendants of Isaac. But more to that at another time. Let's come back to the Kaaba. According to Islamic belief, Abraham built the Kaaba, Ishmael took care of it, and over generations it was revered by prophets and believers as Allah's house. That's why Muslims call it Baytullah, which means house of Allah. In the Quran it is also mentioned as sacred house, revered house, and so on. The black stone at one corner of the Kaaba is also believed to have been placed there by Abraham. But at the time of Muhammad, the Kaaba was held holy by Arab pagans, not by Christians and Jews. Muslims and some scholars close to Islam also claim that Christians and Jews regularly paid respect to the Kaaba, but there is no such evidence. As for how the Kaaba became a pagan site, Muslims explain that people became over time inclined towards polytheism and idolatry, which would explain why there were idols in the Kaaba during Muhammad's time. But the Kaaba, according to Islamic sources, was nevertheless dedicated to one God and was also a very important site because Mecca was a trade center that was visited by people of all kinds of beliefs. Again, according to Islamic tradition and belief, Muhammad started preaching at the Kaaba once he declared his prophethood. And after he was driven out of Mecca and fled to Medina, he came back again to conquer Mecca, and then he entered the Kaaba, destroyed all idols belonging to the pagans, let it clean out, and dedicated it again only to Allah. The destruction of other people's holy artifacts by Muhammad is ironically not seen as an aggression by Muslims. It is seen as a just cause because Muhammad claimed the Kaaba for Allah, his own God. Imagine founding a new religion, going to Mecca, destroying the Kaaba, building your own temple there instead, and saying, well, that's what my God told me. Imagine the Islamic outcry if that happened. Anyway, that's a summary of the Islamic view on the origins of the Kaaba. Now let's come to the non-Islamic, more realistic view. First off, as mentioned at the beginning, Muslims pray towards the Kaaba because the Quran says so, and because Muhammad did so. But that wasn't always true. When Muhammad began his prophecy, he wouldn't pray towards the Kaaba, but towards Jerusalem. Coincidentally, Jews pray towards Jerusalem too. They call it Mizrah instead of Qibla. Mizrah stands for east and stands for the direction of Jerusalem from the Jewish diaspora's perspective. Jews also used to pray towards Jerusalem when Muhammad was alive, and there were lots of them in and around Mecca. From an objective point of view, it looks very much like Muhammad started the prayer direction thing because Jews did the same thing, and he claimed that his religion came from the same origins. Now, very funnily, the direction of the prayer suddenly changed at some time and turned from Jerusalem towards Kaaba. According to early Islamic historian Tabari, who wrote a biography of Muhammad, Jews would mock Muhammad for using the same direction to pray, because Muhammad was hostile to them when they rejected his message, which sounded ridiculous to most of them. The theory that the direction changed because Jews mocked him becomes even clearer if you read the Quran. In chapter 2 of the Quran literally responds to people mocking Muhammad for his practice, then announces the change, and justifies it because it says that the first direction towards Jerusalem was only a test for the believers. Muslims prayed towards Jerusalem for years before it changed. What test was that? What was the purpose? I'm really curious. How does that test your belief? Only the history of the Muslim Qibla, the direction of the prayer, makes Islam look extremely ridiculous in its own sources. But let's come to the history of the Kaaba. As a side note, it is important to point out that pre-Islamic Arabia was extremely underdeveloped and primitive. Literature had no big importance, and written texts basically didn't exist. That's why it's really hard to find out anything about pre-Islamic history, and many people are forced to read the biased Islamic view. Islamic sources claim that Abraham built the Kaaba for Allah and designated it as a place for current Islamic practices, like circling it, fasting, sacrificing animals, and so on. It is declared to be the most important thing about Abraham, one of the most important things to Allah. The problem is that the Bible never mentioned the Kaaba. Now, Islam claims that Allah is the same God of the Bible. But if all of this is really the way Islam tells us, then why was the Kaaba never mentioned in the Bible? Why was it never mentioned in Jewish traditions, in the Talmud? Why was it not held important among Christians at all? The Quran even claims that Allah gave Abraham the mission to instate practices like circling the Kaaba or sacrificing. But Christians and Jews don't do such a thing. If that place was so important to Allah, who Muslims claim is the same God of the Bible, it would have been frequently visited by Christians and Jews everywhere. But there is no mention of the Kaaba at all in the history of Christianity and Judaism before Islam. Only Islamic sources claim that Christians and Jews also respected the Kaaba religiously, but there is no evidence to that. That's why many historians don't buy that story. Sure, Muslims claim that Jews and Christians falsified their scriptures, the Bible, but both Jews and Christians, especially their religious authority, want to be believers and uphold their religion. What is the purpose of removing references to the Kaaba from the Bible, from other texts, from their oral traditions, or even from their memories? Why would they do that? If the Kaaba is only not mentioned among Christians and Jews because the Bible was falsified, how the hell did Christians and Jews even manage that when there are so many heretical sects among both religions? It was difficult to unify Christianity and Judaism about very basic things like dress codes and Jesus. But it was so easy to get rid of venerating Kaaba altogether, all Christians, all Jews. No serious and normal person, no healthy person could possibly believe that. Also, the locations and journeys of Abraham are in the Bible. Current illustrations of his journeys and locations show approximately where he was and what he did. He was far in the north. Mecca is not even remotely close to his journeys, and traveling there would have taken so long and would have been so pointless. According to most credible sources, early in history, the surroundings of Mecca were mostly an empty, unfriendly, and uninteresting desert. Some Muslims attempt to prove that the Kaaba was actually mentioned in the Bible by pointing at one part of the Bible where it talks of Abraham building an altar. But according to the Bible, Abraham built several altars for God in multiple places, not only one. The same apologists who make such claims totally ignore that fact. Also, if Mecca and the Kaaba were so important to Abraham's God, wouldn't the Christian Romans have come down to Mecca and taken it? That brings us to our next point. The Romans didn't even touch anything close to Mecca, especially after becoming Christians. The closest point that was ever taken by the Great Roman Empire was a place called Hegra, which is today called Medain Saleh. It is closer to Jerusalem than it is to Mecca. And the Roman Empire didn't leave anything untouched that was remotely important, and the desert dwellers had certainly not the strength to stop them. Also, Mecca was never even mentioned by non-Islamic and non-Arab sources until the 8th century, when Byzantines mentioned it due to their relations with the growing Muslims. This refutes one Islamic point, that the Kaaba, Mecca, was a very important and big trade center. That is only an Islamic claim. It was visited by Persians and surrounding Arabs, sure, but it was not a big trade center. There is no evidence to that, and every evidence points against that claim. That's why many historians actually come to the conclusion that the claim that Mecca was a trade center was only made up by Muslims or exaggerated because it was only important to Arabs. If it was really such a big and important place of trade and culture and whatever, North African rulers, Romans, the Eastern Roman Empire, Persian empires and others wouldn't have ignored it, for sure. They would all have attempted to take it, but evidently no one, no matter from what belief, cared about Mecca until Muhammad was successful with his prophethood. All evidence that we have points toward the theory that the Kaaba was only built a few centuries before Muhammad, by Arab pagans, not by Abraham, not by Christians, not by Jews. By the weak Arab pagans that weren't remotely as big and strong as early Christians, Jews, and other religious groups. As mentioned, according to Islamic sources, the Kaaba was full of pagan idols, hundreds of them, and had other idols surrounding them. Because, the Christians and Jews were totally not bothered that some pagans are messing with their holy site. They just thought, oh man, I'm just here to buy some things for my children. The main idol of the Kaaba was Hubal, who was the supreme god of the tribe that held the Kaaba, the Quraysh tribe, to which Muhammad belonged too. But aside from that, the Kaaba had hundreds of other idols that were instead revered by other pagan tribes around Mecca. The Quraysh were a tribe of merchants, which is why other Arab tribes used to visit them very often and made statements at the Kaaba by placing their own idols there and worshipping together. So it was clearly an important pagan site that only pagans used religiously. When Muhammad declared his prophethood and his new god, Allah, the closest holy site to him was the Kaaba. In the end, it seems very much like Muhammad was interested in monotheism and in Abrahamic traditions. He didn't initially bother very much about the Kaaba in a religious sense, but he had more and more disagreements and hostilities with Christians and Jews who rejected his message clearly. And since his own tribe, the Quraysh, and other pagans rejected his message very clearly and strictly, it looks like his interest in the Kaaba was something that had more to do with his pagan origins and with his feud with the pagans. It looks like he gradually wanted to get rid of Christian and Jewish influence in his religion, but he also wanted to get rid of the pagan pressure, because the pagans in Mecca didn't like him and wanted to prevent him from growing. So he designated the Kaaba as the center of his belief, as the direction of his prayer, just the way pagans used to. And he used this cause, conquered Mecca, captured the Kaaba for his own religion, but reinstated pagan practices like circling the Kaaba and venerating a black stone that was venerated before only by pagans. It looks very much like all of this is just a pagan thing. Nothing related to the Bible. Nothing to the God of the Bible, the prophets of the Bible, and nothing related to monotheism and Abrahamic religion. As said, there is simply not enough evidence about pre-Islamic Arabia, but all evidence that we have clearly points to this, that the Kaaba was only fancied by Muhammad due to paganism. There is just no evidence at all for Muhammad's and Islam's theories. That's why, from an objective, honest, and researching point of view, we can only come to the conclusion that the Kaaba is an Islamic issue, a pagan issue. That's why we can barely say that Islam is an Abrahamic religion, but we can firmly say that Islam was a very Arab and a very pagan religion. That's probably why Abrahamic holy sites are here, while the Islamic holy site is here, where Arabs and pagans lived. Or Muhammad just lost his compass. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please don't forget to like, to subscribe, and to share. My videos are not monetized, so you can watch everything without any ads. If you want to support me and my work, you can support me on Patreon. The link is below in the description. Thank you all so much for your contributions, and thank you so much for every kind of support. Have a great weekend. Thanks again, and stay away from Islam.